It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, December 1st, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high-quality content that loves a two-game sweep in the Metro.
Yeah, good stuff.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and welcome to Locked On Flyers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade, and I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 20 years, Russ Cohen. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, so if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com. Place your NFL live bets all season long. To keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter. Russ, we had a very good result for the Philadelphia Flyers in their back-to-back against the New York Islanders and New Jersey Devils. I think, looking at where the Flyers stand as of Saturday night. Now, we do know that is going to change on Sunday, prior to, or we're recording this prior to knowing the answer to this, but the Caps are playing the Isles on Sunday, and one of them is going to leapfrog the Flyers in the standings here. However, as of Saturday night, the Flyers were in third place in the Metro. That division is incredibly close, and one or two games can raise you or drop you like three standings positions right now. But still, for the Flyers to be in that collection, I think is super important, and they showed a lot of resiliency this weekend.
They did. No, it's good. I mean, like I said, I think that third spot and those two wild cards are going to be up for grabs for a while. They are in that. They are not without their foibles. Even the coach knows that. But, they're overcoming, and so it was a good road trip.
It really was. And I think, we're going to talk about the Pens in the next segment, who are also part of that grouping of teams. We'll have our Nemesis of the week later in the show as well. But I think that there's a couple of things going on here overall. One of which was the Flyers and holding on to a lead. We've been so hyper-focused on the comebacks that the Flyers have had to mount and them being successful at that. But now these are, a couple of games where the Flyers have had a lead that they let dwindle. And I think that is a skill that this team needs to build for sure. Rick Tocchet was asked about it prior to the game against the Devils, and he said that it's a matter of not getting too conservative, that when you have a chance to make a play, you do. Even if you think, you're just trying to protect your lead. If there's open ice and you have the puck, skate it up. Right? Don't get too caught up in the, oh no, I don't want to make a mistake and cough up a goal, because then you just do, right?
Right. Yeah, I specifically asked Trevor Zegras post-game. The way I phrased it was, hey, coming from the locker room into the third period, I didn't even talk about the Devils having a power play for a short time. I just said, what was the discussion like to keep the Devils from catching up? And before he got into that, he goes, well, yeah, it was my turnover that caused that, but we were trying to move the puck forward, and that's what the conversation was. So he instantly took ownership, and that's a really good thing, because sometimes it's hard for some hockey players to do that. I think it really shows a sign of maturity that he did, and so that's that was a big thing. And so the Devils got it close, and without Dan Vladar, that game definitely would have been tied. It definitely could have gone the other way. But it didn't. And so, that's what counts in the end.
Right. And I think that, we saw two really interesting but very different games in terms of, how the Flyers were attempting to hold on to the lead or not, as the case may be, especially against the Islanders, right? Where, once the Islanders kind of turned it on, the Flyers just didn't know what to do at that point, and kind of their defensive structure fell apart. And, I thought it was interesting that the only difference really in the lineups between the two games was on the blue line, right?
Right.
Where, other than the goaltender, where we had Juleson, who played against the Islanders, and Zamula played against the Devils. And, it is becoming clear that Juleson is the preferred defenseman over those two, even though, we have said in the
It's up and
past
down with him.
that it's up and down, but Juleson has been getting more and more consistent. And especially now that they moved Andre up to Drysdale, this Sealer Juleson third pairing, it's not ideal, but it's better than what they had before.
Yeah, Yegor Zamula does seem to be the odd man out, and especially if Rasmus Ristolainen comes back soon or anytime this year. I just say that because like he's already exceeded the second time they talked about him when he might return, regardless of him skating. But as far as Zamula, I do think he's being scouted. I do think the Flyers would rather trade him than risk putting him on waivers and having him get taken there, which he probably would. And so, if they could get a fourth or a fifth, which they're missing in this draft, that they're missing a fourth. Yeah, they're missing a fourth and fifth. They had 2 sixths. So, if they can recoup one of those, they should do it because they had too many defensemen, especially when Ristolainen comes back. That's just going to be the way it is.
Exactly. So that is something we will keep an eye out for as well. And, who knows, it could have happened after we recorded this, but
I believe there were eyes on him at the Devils game.
Yeah, that is for sure. So, and they had to play him in order to make that an option for the Flyers to.
And he didn't have the greatest game, but he did show that he could get the puck to the net and do a few things, which for some teams, like a team like Tampa that's low on defenders, they could use.
Right. Now, I think another interesting pattern we're starting to see with the Flyers is goals in bunches, where we've seen that like multiple games in the last several weeks. And I find that to be an interesting phenomenon here with the Flyers, that they're feeding off each other in a really positive way.
They do feed off each other in a positive way. I think that's what happens. There's like a little bit of a feeding frenzy, but then they do sit back when they have these leads. That's also become a part of this. And so it's a weird thing that now they can start off the game better than they did, but now it's also like staying ahead. And so like it's weird. It's like it seems like the goalposts just get moved and changed every time Rick Tocchet makes a change or two to kind of like see where this team is at in regards to his vision.
Right. We have to talk about a couple of guys that stood out this week, and the first of which is, of course, Matvei Michkov. I think he had that double minor in the Isles game that really was, caused the Flyers to have challenges in maintaining that lead. And then, of course, they didn't there. And so, I think there's a lot of scrutiny on him in terms of the taking bad penalties because, he took one right in front of the official in one game and then, causing the bleeding. So it was a double minor. Like that is not great. However, I feel like his game against the Devils was a really good one in terms of making progress on that front. Even though he did get the penalty, he got the jailbreak-ish goal, to make up for it coming out of the box. And that's something that he's a cherry picker by nature. So this is a setup that's ideal for him. And he wound up with 2 goals in the game. The goal that was originally credited to Travis Konechny got credited to him later on.
I was in the car back a half hour into the trip, and somebody who was in the car had to change their story because all of a sudden, 30 minutes after the game, they changed that. That's a tough thing. They should do that quicker, by the way.
They should. Yeah, I know. I posted my game recap and then it was 5 minutes later when they switched it.
It's a tough thing.
What are you going to do?
It's a tough thing when that happens. But here's what I would say. With Matvei Michkov, he's still not a part of the offense. He's not. They put him in the box, because they know he could create something coming out of the box. They use him at least one shift in overtime because they know with open ice he could do something. They'll use him in the shootout because they know he's got a great shot. But there's not full trust there still. And he's not a focus on the offense at all.
Right.
And that part, and he played a little bit more because of the back-to-back nature, so did Gurbankin. That'll be interesting to see how that works out when it's not back-to-back again. But my whole thing is he could score more than a goal a game every once in a while if you make him more a part of the offense, which they are hesitant to do, and I think
Right.
that's a mistake. Even
Yeah,
while
and
things are going good.
I sometimes think he's in the wrong position in the power play too, where it's
Yeah.
not like working to his advantage. Like he needs to be like skating in front of the net and then going back around, and like him being too far out is not ideal, I think.
That's not where he's going to score from.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's part of it, and hopefully we'll see more of that. Speaking of Gurbankin, quality ice time, I thought in both games,
Yeah.
9:45 versus the Isles and 9:25 versus the Devils. So that's improving, which is good. And I thought he
But we'll
played
see.
generally
We'll
well.
see if he gets that against the Penguins.
Yeah, we are going to talk about Owen Tippett and his career milestone. Good to
Yeah.
see that he got that 100th goal, 200th point in the game against the Devils, and got that awarded goal, which is
I think that
always
was
a
the second
kicker.
time I'd seen that happen. I didn't know if he was far enough in the offensive zone that they would count it, and I think that's why they
Right.
huddled up. But it was the right call.
Yeah. No, it really was. And then, of course, goaltending coming up big. Of course, you always want to see Samerson in the shootout because that's almost a guaranteed W. Although I did ask Rick Tocchet specifically
Yeah.
pre-game before the Devils game. I was like, you've been doing all these shootout games, and it feels like, you're resting on that laurel, so to speak, of knowing that you have good goaltenders in the shootout. And I was like, "Are you doing anything to work on the overtime play?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, we did a few weeks ago, and,
Yeah,
we're
they had a
working on some things."
report. I
Yeah, they
mean,
had a report about it, which is good, but they are definitely kinda depending on the goaltending in the shootout, and I don't love that, but, you know, y
he
you go with what works sometimes.
sure, but he does he admitted that, hey, if there's 30 seconds to go, we're maybe not going to be in overtime. We maybe won't be as aggressive as we should be.
Yeah,
But he also was smart enough to know these things can go against you in a heartbeat with the
right.
shootout. And perfect example was Ziegler scored the other night, but then so did Simon Holmstrom, and it made it back to square one. So if those things do start going against you, all of a sudden that strength becomes like an iffy thing because sometimes that's just the way hockey is. And so
Yeah,
he understands that. And I think that's good not to just expect that.
right, right. But, again, some really good work from Dan Vladar, especially against the
Maybe his best game
Devils.
because there were a lot of early good scoring chances, even when it was 4-1. And then that third period, there were a lot of them.
A lot, a lot. All right. Well, we're going to see how all of this translates into our arch nemesis, the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are unexpectedly very good this season. So we are going to talk about them coming up next. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, energy, mood, even my skin. And that's why I've been using DripDrop. It's doctor developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day looks like. DripDrop isn't your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands using a science backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. I work out a lot and I like using DripDrop as part of my daily routine. I'll mix a packet in the morning before I go to the gym to make sure I have the right level of energy to power through my spin class or on that weights day. My go-to flavor is the zero sugar strawberry lemonade. It's become my secret weapon for staying hydrated, which is so important. It helps me feel sharper, calmer, and honestly, just better overall. Right now, DripDrop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com, use promo code LockedOnNHL. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LockedOnNHL for 20% off. And stock up now before the heat hits hard and keep your body and mind performing at their best with DripDrop. Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen of the day, and thanks for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. On tomorrow's show, we will be recapping the Flyers versus Pens game we're about to talk about. Plus, we'll talk about the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, as we do each and every Tuesday. They had a bit of a rough couple of games this week, but some good information came out of it about the team. And so we'll get into that on tomorrow's show. Plus, we're going to answer your mailbag questions on the Wednesday show, so get them in. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com, send us a message on any of our socials, or comment over on YouTube. The Pittsburgh Penguins, Russ, as I said, they're just right in the thick of this standings race in the Metro here. And if we recall the first matchup against Pittsburgh this season on October 28th, the Flyers won that in a shootout. It was kind of a mess of a game when all was said and done. Of course, Sidney Crosby scored in the third period to tie it up, talking about holding a lead for the Flyers, as we did in the last segment. It was an extremely spicy game. There were 48 penalty minutes total for each team.
Yeah.
And there was that whole thing with Trevor Zegras getting a misconduct at the end of the overtime, which meant he could not participate in the shootout. And so that was a little dicey as well, but the Flyers did prevail. So I think both teams are probably pretty eager to step out on the ice against each other.
Yeah. So a couple things. Those two of the old guys, Crosby and Malkin. Sidney Crosby is averaging 19 minutes a game. He has 16 goals in 24 games. Like, it's crazy. Like, last year he had 32, 33 goals, 91 points, which was amazing. His career high is 51 goals. Like, he might hit that. Whatever
and
you
he's
ask,
now the 15th all time in goals in the league. He moved up a notch.
It's unbelievable, considering the time he lost for concussions. He's a lot like Mario Lemieux in the sense of lost time and still having an amazing career, right? So you have to worry about that. And then you have Evgeny Malkin, who really has been overshadowed by Crosby his entire career. I just looked it up. He's more than a point a game. He's got 520 goals. He's a point a game this year. This might be his last year. Like, he's another all-time great in the league. And he just sometimes, kind of gets overlooked. Now, against the Flyers, it's always been weird because if the Flyers are smart, you leave him alone. You don't try and get under his skin. You don't try and bother him, because when they do that, then he's going to have a 2 or 3 point game. If you leave him alone, sometimes he will derail himself against the Flyers and have a couple penalties and not score anything. I've seen it go both ways. But right now, the way the Flyers kind of get penalized, I'm a little worried they're going to go the other way, and somebody like Michkov or Konechny is going to have a bad penalty. They're going to fire him up, and then if you get Evgeny Malkin mad, that's when he plays his best.
Yeah, I think a lot is going to hinge on the play of Sean Couturier in this game. I think he's been obviously playing very well, and getting on the board. I think he's just played well defensively this past weekend overall. There's little things here and there, but overall, I thought really good. And I think Sean Couturier has been somebody that the Flyers have depended on against the Pens for a long time. And he knows those two guys like better than anybody from a defensive perspective. And I think he's going to be just a key player in all of that.
Yeah. And who the Flyers don't know is Ben Kindle, and he is with the team. And I didn't foresee this happening so quickly. I knew he had offensive talent. I knew he was fast, but he has really gelled. At times I've seen him play with Crosby. I don't think he's playing on a line all the time with him, but he's got like 9 points in 23 games, like 6 goals. Like, he is effective, and he is a guy that with his speed can make things happen. And that is something that sometimes derails the Flyers defense. So, they have to watch out for him. You always have to watch out for Brian Rust. He's another thorn in the side of the Flyers for sure. Like, this is a team now that is marginally dangerous, and they're not going away.
Yeah, it is also interesting because when we talked about the Pens in October in that matchup, we were talking about Justin Brazeau, who was unexpectedly really good so far, right? And he scored in that game against the Flyers, of course. He's been on IR, right? And injured. And then you have Kindle come up, and he's like another surprise. And the Pens have like a history of this where some random dude, I mean, neither of these guys are random.
No,
right?
because he's a first rounder. Brazeau is a little more random.
Little more random. Yeah. Obviously Kindle was a known entity, right?
Yeah.
But I just find it interesting that another unexpected guy is just, stepping up. And that's just the history of the Pittsburgh Penguins in a nutshell.
And much like the Flyers, they're getting better goaltending this year.
They
And
are.
that is making a big difference on their team. It makes a big difference. When your goaltending is trustworthy, it changes the whole outlook for a team.
Yeah, it does. And, they are coming off of a pretty tough loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs. They lost 7-2
Yeah.
on Saturday.
I'm sure
I
Kyle
think,
Dubas did not enjoy that.
no, I am sure he did not in any way. But I think that matchup has its own level of drama and narrative to it that
Yes.
you almost can't really utilize it as far as what it could look like against the Flyers. However, they are coming off a loss, and so I do think there's going to be some extra motivation.
And that last game, the way things did work
The
out
way
in
things,
the shootout,
yep,
there's
yep,
going to be some action.
yeah, I absolutely think
So what
there
that
will
tells
be.
me is Nick Delorier is going to be in there, and Gurbenkin's going to get like 8 minutes, 7.5, 8 minutes. That's what I'm
I
expecting.
mean, we'll see. We'll see. It
I know.
could be. One of the interesting things about the Pens game against the Leafs is that the Leafs went into huge shot blocking mode against them, right? They had 26 block shots, and that's something we saw a lot of with the Flyers
We did.
recently, that they're utilizing blocking shots more in more specific situations.
Strategic situations, not just
Yeah.
at will.
Yeah. And I think
That's
this
true.
is a situation where they might have to bring that up again because they could
Right.
see the success that Toronto had against the Pens and keeping the scoring down in these situations. So I find that to be an interesting aspect of the Flyers game this season as far as shot blocking, that they are using it more strategically, and this seems to be a circumstance that it might make sense.
Now, the one thing is, Dan Muse is a lot like John Cooper as far as being an X's and O's guy. And Tampa did figure out how to neutralize what the Flyers do. And Dan Muse is going to look at that. He's going to show a lot of video about that. And when you have someone like Crosby, it is like having a coach on the ice. So what you saw against the Devils, you might not see against Pittsburgh. You'll see it from the Flyers, but the Devils were a little loose on D. I think we could all agree on that.
Yep.
And and it's not like the Penguins have great defense, but they do have elite puck movers with Letang, with Carlson. And so, you have to be concerned. You have to really keep an eye out. Again,
yeah, but even Dumba is working out real well there.
Yeah, no, Dumba can play and he can be physical.
Yeah.
So this is a rivalry game that you have to,
Love it.
you have to be
Can't wait.
careful about. But it'll be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a super fun game. Very excited for it. And of course, we will talk about it on tomorrow's show. But it is Monday, so we will have our Nemesis of the week coming up next.
NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets and as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting's the best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. You can get the next touchdown. You could bet the next touchdown scorers. You could drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. Preseason, I mentioned the Denver Broncos. They have great odds to win the Super Bowl. If you don't go with them, maybe go with the Rams. Lesser odds, but a better chance. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL and live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
All right, before we get to our Nemesis of the week, I just want to highlight a contract that got signed recently that we haven't talked about, and that's Mike Matheson's deal in Montreal and what he got relative to any Flyers potential contracts coming up. He got $6 million over 5 years, which I think is a pretty solid deal. Now, I know he's a very different defenseman than Jamie Drysdale, but I feel like as far as tiers, there could be some similarity there. Is that any indication of what Drysdale could get?
Yeah, this is baseline, like second pairing money now.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And Matheson's older, but he gets more points, and he is a
Right.
plus 12 this year. So he is different. He's changed his game, and he has changed it the last couple of years. As you get older, it happens. Drysdale has changed his game too. More defense, a little less offense.
Right.
But this is the baseline money. This is like, it's crazy money for defensemen now. That's what we're really talking about. So, like, this is what I would expect him to get.
Yeah, and it's just so interesting when you think about looking at, Travis Sanheim's contract, which is 6.25, right?
Right.
And you're like, Travis Sanheim should be making 8 based on this.
Maybe more.
Yeah, I just think, just starting to see these drips and drabs of other teams and what they're doing with their defensemen is important to discuss, in the context of Jamie Drysdale and what his place on the team is and what kind of contract.
Yeah, it's what the market will bear.
Yeah. Yep. Turning to our nemesis of the week. Last week, I talked about Florida because the Flyers were facing Tampa and the Panthers in the same week. Mixed results there for sure, but I think my nervousness is maybe not the right word, but anxiety over the state of Florida and the Flyers and hockey was warranted going into that. Yes.
Like the state.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. True. You talked about the NFL Thanksgiving game schedule and whether they're available over the air or not. They should be available because it's the holiday weekend tradition, and they were not.
No
at least
streaming
for the
at
Sunday
all.
Games. Yep. This week for me, my nemesis is Owen Tippett, but for a good reason. I think that he's just a player that when he shows you his best, it is really fun and it's really remarkable, right? But he can be so frustrating at the same time because you see the speed he has. He does have a shot when he gets it on target. But you see the other aspect of his game where he only has like one move and he doesn't know how to adjust it, right? And, sometimes you see him not be quick enough to anticipate passes or whatever. There's like little things about his game that you want him to clean up. But like, again, when you see his best, it is so much fun to watch. And him being successful is a harbinger for the Flyers in a nutshell, right? Because if he just picks it up, the whole team could come along with him in a lot of ways. And it'll just kind of add to this mix of really good things that are happening on the Flyers right now. And so I love that he got these career milestones. He got the Bernie mask in the locker room post game. You always love to see that. And I just, every time we see these little nuggets, we saw him open the season really well and then things fell off. He's having this moment. Like, let's continue this moment, Owen Tippett. Let's keep it moving forward because I want nothing but success for you with the Philadelphia Flyers. I would much rather that than to be talking about him as a trade object.
If I could pull my video of him pre-draft, we were on a boat in Chicago, and I was interviewing him on the boat. I probably have the same questions now that I've asked him then. That's the funny thing about Owen Tippett. I don't have all the answers with him. I have the same questions. So,
plus, we always need like a great ginger on the team, and he needs to be that guy. Right?
Yeah. No, that's fair. My nemesis is going to be QR codes. Like, I'm a tech guy. I may not be using high tech for this, but this is proven. That's why I don't. But I do have a lot of high tech stuff at home. But QR codes have become the business lazy way of trying to get you to look up stuff and have them save money. So perfect example is if you're in a hotel and you go into like the hotel, restaurant or something, you want to look at a menu. Like, being a hotel restaurant major, there is something about looking at a menu that makes it more
a physical menu
that gives you more of a connection to the place. You kind of get a feel for the place. But if you just download a menu off a QR code and that's how they make you kind of order, don't like it. It's too Jetsons like. It's like and they do this with other things on your TV now. Everything's got a QR code. It's like, I'm not doing it. I understand it's cool and whatever, but I'm not doing it because there's still some things that I think work better the old way. I'm all for technology. I'm all for moving forward, but QR menus, no. QR codes, they're useful at times, but I think businesses have used them to save money, not necessarily to make it a better experience for the consumer.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings. There's some situations where I don't like the QR codes, but I do actually like it for logging into things. You can do it automatically,
Okay.
and I don't have to like look up a password because it just works, right? Because
Okay.
it goes to the right screen, and then I have the password saved, and we're done. Menus, sometimes I want the physical menu, but sometimes it's very helpful because if it's like a low lighting restaurant or something, I want to be able to expand the size of the text, and I can do that on my phone, where I cannot do that on the physical menu. So
Okay.
there is
But what if
that.
you go into a diner? What if diners all of a sudden did away with menus?
No,
You'd be so
diner
against
menus.
that, and so would I.
Done. Yes, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Selected
Right.
circumstances.
Right.
And then the other thing that I think QR codes has been really good for is like I volunteer with some charities, and sometimes they put up QR codes to donate. And I think
That's
that's
fine. I get
really
that.
good.
Yeah.
So, I'm kind of mixed on QR codes, but definitely specific circumstances for
Yeah, I
sure.
don't need to buy like 16 ounces of Downy with a QR code from my TV. I don't.
No, that is true. That is absolutely true. And on that note, that will do it for today's show. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So let us know your mailbag questions via any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, check out Locked On NHL Game Night. It's every game, every night until that Stanley Cup champion is crowned. You got local analysis on a national scale with NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL. It's on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.